I'd noticed a change in Emma for a while, but it's funny how your mind twists reality to keep things looking normal. For months, she'd been on her phone constantly, more guarded with her texts, quieter around the house. Sometimes she'd go out just to get some air after dinner or take longer at the store than usual. I wasn't blind. I was just convincing myself it was stress or something at work. We'd always been open with each other. At least that's what I'd thought. Last Saturday night, she came downstairs dressed up. Way more than I'd seen her do in a long time. Red dress, high heels, her hair perfect. My wife never dressed like that unless it was a special occasion, and she never looked that excited for a regular night out with friends. My pulse ticked up, but I held my tongue, nodding along as she tossed out some vague story about meeting old friends she hadn't seen in ages. I knew her friends. The regular crew was always a loud, low-key crowd, and she dressed down for them. But I didn't push her. I just said, "Have fun." And she smiled, almost like I was some clueless stranger watching her from the sidelines. After she left, the uneasy feeling grew. I don't know what came over me, but something snapped. I went upstairs to our bedroom, determined to shake off the weirdness. But as I stood there, I saw her purse on the bed, half open. Normally, I'd never go through her things. That night was different. I walked over and, almost automatically, started rifling through her bag, feeling like an intruder in my own home. At first, it was just the usual stuff: lipstick, gum, sunglasses, her wallet. But then, buried under a mess of receipts and loose bills, I found a small pack of pills. I stared at it, turning it over in my hand, and every beat of my pulse screamed at me that something was wrong. It was birth control. And not just that, birth control that wasn't in her life for the last 2 years. We'd stopped with all that after agreeing to start trying for a family. At least that's what I thought we agreed on. My heart pounded as my mind scrambled for reasons, explanations. But no matter how many ways I turned it, the answer stayed the same. I sat on the edge of the bed, that little pack of pills burning a hole through my hand. The questions came fast, one after another. Why was she on birth control again? And why the hell would she hide it? It hit me then. Every single excuse she'd given me over the last few months felt flimsy, rehearsed. The late work nights, the catching up with old friends, even the occasional, weirdly flirty texts she'd gotten that she brushed off as jokes from the girls. Suddenly, it all snapped into place like some kind of cruel puzzle. The reality that Emma might actually be seeing someone else, that she was lying to my face, shook me to my core. And yet, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe she had some medical reason for them. But that wouldn't make sense. We talked about everything, or at least I thought we did. I could feel anger boiling up inside of me. My wife, the woman who swore honesty was everything, had left me out in the cold. I couldn't sit still. I was pacing, my head spinning with all these thoughts and a growing rage I didn't know what to do with. I needed answers, so I did something I'd never done before. I opened her laptop, figuring maybe there'd be something, anything that would explain this. Logging in, I felt like an invader, crossing a line that made me sick. But I couldn't turn back now. My hands shook as I opened her browser history, scrolled through her messages. And then, in her email, I saw a name I didn't recognize. A man named Jason. Just his name, popping up a few times in her inbox. A series of emails with vague subject lines. Lunch plans? Can we meet? Can't wait to see you. She'd never mentioned a Jason, not once. One of the emails was recent, yesterday actually. My pulse was pounding as I clicked it open, only to find a short, casual message. Tonight was amazing. I still feel like I'm dreaming. Same place next week. I could barely breathe. I read the email again, feeling the words sink in, each one a knife twisting deeper. Tonight was amazing. What the hell was she doing? And with him, I had so many questions, and none of them had any answers that I wanted to hear. It wasn't like Emma had ever even hinted about needing more excitement or something different in our marriage. But now, staring at this line of messages, it felt like she'd been living a completely separate life. How long had this been going on? And how deep was it? I forced myself to dig further, each click both sickening and addictive. Another email came up, a chain of exchanges from a month ago. She'd told me she was going to a work thing, and she'd been gone for hours. Here was the proof. A string of emails arranging to meet at a hotel downtown. The entire exchange was laced with flirty banter, inside jokes I didn't understand, and what felt like an intimate familiarity between them. This wasn't some mistake or slip. This was planned, ongoing. And then I saw an attachment. Photos of them sitting together in a booth at what looked like a restaurant, with her leaning in close, laughing, her hand on his arm. She had that look, the one I used to think was only for me. My heart felt like it had been shredded. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, a sick, hollow ache settling in my stomach. I couldn't stop seeing that expression on her face, the same one she'd used to look at me. There was no denying it now. She was with him. And all this time, she'd looked me in the eyes, smiled at me, kissed me goodnight, and walked out that door to be with him. My hands clenched as a dark, twisted resolve settled over me. There would be no more guessing, no more blind trust. She would come home, and she would look me in the eyes and tell me the truth, every last bit of it. And I would make damn sure she knew what it felt like to be the one left in the dark. The hours crawled by as I waited, my mind flipping between fury and disbelief. I kept hearing those lines in her emails, seeing her smile in that photo, feeling that unfamiliarity that somehow felt more real than anything we'd had in months. I knew I wouldn't be able to just sit there when she walked through the door, pretending that I didn't know. This wasn't the kind of thing I could swallow down and talk about in the morning. Finally, I heard her car pull into the driveway. The familiar sound of her footsteps, ones that I used to listen for, feeling like everything was right in the world, now only filled me with rage. I stood up and walked toward the door, trying to keep my expression steady, as if I hadn't just spent the night piecing together the reality of her betrayal. When she opened the door, she had that glow about her. Normally, I'd be glad to see her happy, but now it felt like a slap to the face. I watched her carefully as she noticed me waiting, and her smile faltered for just a second. She quickly brushed it off, walking in like everything was fine, but I caught that hesitation. "Hey," she said, setting down her purse on the table by the door. "You're still up?" "Yeah," I replied, my voice steady but colder than usual. "Couldn't sleep." She laughed softly, like she was trying to make the atmosphere lighter. "Maybe you should have come out tonight. It was great. I met a few people I haven't seen in ages." "That so?" I forced a casual tone, watching her every move. "Must have been a really good time." She looked up, her expression wary. "Yeah. Why are you looking at me like that?" Without a word, I reached over and picked up her purse from the table, pulling out the birth control pills. I held them up between us, letting the silence settle thick and heavy. Her eyes widened, and she stared at them for a split second, something close to panic flickering across her face. She quickly masked it, trying to play it off with a confused smile. "Oh, those," she stammered. I got them a while ago. Just forgot to throw them out, I guess." I narrowed my eyes, keeping my voice low. "Forgot to throw them out? Emma, you've been carrying them around in your purse. And last time I checked, you didn't need them 2 years ago, since we were supposedly trying." She swallowed, her expression faltering. "Look, you're blowing this way out of proportion. It's not what you think." "Really?" I stepped closer, feeling the words almost rip out of me. "Because what I think is that you've been lying to me. What I think is that I just went through your emails and found out all about Jason." Her face went pale. For a split second, I thought she'd break down, finally admit it. But instead, she crossed her arms and narrowed her eyes. "You went through my emails? Wow. Okay. So now you're snooping around like a paranoid boyfriend." I felt my jaw clench. "Don't try to turn this around on me. I trusted you, and you're lying through your teeth right now." She shook her head, scoffing, her face a mix of frustration and something almost defiant. "So what if I had lunch with someone? You don't trust me enough to let me have my own friends." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The deflection, the outright nerve of her trying to flip this on me as if I was the one overreacting. My patience was wearing thin, but I forced myself to stay calm, if only to see how far she was willing to take her lies. "Lunch?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping me. "Emma, you didn't just have lunch. There's a whole damn thread of emails with this guy, dates, and even hotel meetups. And that photo, the one of you two looking cozy, that wasn't just lunch, was it?" She stared at me, her face stone cold, then turned away, like she couldn't even bother with an answer. It was almost as if the truth was too trivial for her to acknowledge. Finally, she sighed, throwing her hands up. So you've been digging around in my emails and now you think you know everything? Fine. Yes, Jason and I have gotten close, but it's not what you're making it out to be. I was stunned, my anger mixing with disbelief. Not what I'm making it out to be. I just read an email where he says, "Last night was amazing," and asks to meet you next week. How exactly am I supposed to interpret that, Emma? She rolled her eyes, her tone turning condescending, like I was the one who didn't understand. Look, sometimes people connect. He's been going through a rough time, and I've been there for him. That's it. Maybe he misinterpreted things, but it's not like I've done anything wrong. So you're seriously going to stand here and tell me that this is just some friendship? I asked, barely able to contain the disgust in my voice. Yeah, I am, she shot back, her voice sharpening. I don't owe you every little detail of my life. And if you don't trust me enough to have a friend, that's on you. The audacity of it was like a slap to the face. Here she was, completely unfazed, acting as if I was insane for questioning her, when all the evidence was there in black and white. And the worst part? She wasn't even trying to apologize, to fix this. She was only digging herself in deeper. I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my voice steady. Emma, you're holding on to birth control pills, sneaking around, lying about where you're going, and meeting some guy in hotels. If you don't see how any of that is wrong, then maybe I really don't know you at all. For a moment, I thought I saw a flash of guilt in her eyes, something close to regret, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. She straightened, tilting her chin up with a defiant glare. You know what? She said, her voice laced with anger. Maybe you don't know me. Maybe you've been so busy with your own life that you didn't even notice I needed something different. That was it. Those words sliced through me, a truth I hadn't wanted to see until now. Her words left me stunned. Something different? I echoed, hardly believing what I was hearing. So what, Emma? You were just out there exploring your options, deciding if maybe someone else had more to offer. She shrugged, looking away, almost as if she was bored with the conversation. I didn't plan this, all right? It just happened. You've been so wrapped up in work, barely paying attention to what's going on with me. Jason was there for me when you weren't. My blood boiled, the weight of her words pressing down hard. So what, this is my fault now? You didn't bother to talk to me, didn't give me a chance to understand, and instead you sneak around with some other guy and keep it hidden. She rolled her eyes, exasperated. Oh, please, I tried talking to you. But every time, it's like you'd just shrug it off or say we talk later. So yeah, maybe I got tired of waiting. I had to clench my fists to keep myself from saying something I might regret. I felt trapped between anger and betrayal, struggling to recognize the woman in front of me. So instead of coming to me, the person you supposedly wanted to build a life with, you just went and created one behind my back? Emma scoffed, crossing her arms. It's not like that. Jason is different. He understands me in ways that you never did. He actually listens. Listens. I was almost laughing now, the bitterness too much to hold back. And what exactly did he listen to, Emma? All the times you complained about me? All the stories about how unhappy you were? Her face hardened, the defensive stance coming back. You know what? I'm done with this conversation. You clearly don't get it. I never meant to hurt you. But maybe this is a sign that we've been fooling ourselves. A cold, dead silence fell between us. Her words hanging in the air like smoke, impossible to breathe in. This wasn't just a fling to her. She was done. She'd mentally checked out long before I even knew what was happening. The coldness in her voice was like nothing I'd ever heard from her. She sounded more like a stranger than the woman I'd built my life around. I felt the floor drop out from under me as I realized just how far she'd gone. This wasn't just about a mistake or a moment of weakness. Emma had planned her exit and had been slowly, quietly walking out the door for who knows how long. I took a shaky breath, feeling the weight of this loss crushing down on me. But I couldn't leave it like this. I had to know everything, even if the truth tore me apart. So that's it, I said, the words feeling raw in my throat. You're just done with us? Emma glanced at me, her face unreadable, almost irritated. Maybe I am, she said, her tone low and deliberate. Maybe I've been done for a while, but I didn't want to admit it, because leaving isn't easy, all right? It's scary. But sometimes you meet someone who just clicks. Jason makes me feel alive again. My stomach twisted, but I couldn't let her get away with that. Alive? You think I don't know you've been seeing him behind my back? Lying to me day in and day out while you sneak off to hotels. Feeding me lie after lie. She looked at me with a strange sort of pity, shaking her head. I didn't want it to come to this, but maybe I've just grown out of us and you're too blind to see it. Look at yourself, going through my things, snooping like some insecure teenager. Do you really think this is love? Love. The word came out sharp, bitter. Emma, love is exactly why I'm standing here, giving you the chance to be honest. I could have left after I found those emails, but I didn't. I needed you to explain, to admit that maybe there was still a chance for us. But instead, all I get is this indifference. She sighed, rolling her eyes, as if I was exhausting her. I'm not going to stand here and justify every little thing I did. I'm not a monster for wanting something more. Maybe you're the one who refused to see the signs, and that's on you. That was the moment I felt something inside me snap. She was done hiding, done pretending to care. In her mind, I was the fool, the one clinging to a ghost of a relationship that she'd already buried. And that's when I knew. She'd crossed a line there was no coming back from, that I couldn't take it anymore. The way she stood there, so composed, so done with us, like I was just some inconvenience she had to manage on her way to her new life. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone who looked at me with disdain, as if I were an obstacle, not her husband. Emma? I said, my voice quieter, the anger giving way to something darker, almost a hollow acceptance. Do you even care about what you're throwing away here? She let out a slow breath, glancing around the room as if searching for the right words. But what came out was cold. I don't know what you want me to say. Maybe I thought I did care. But now, I just feel tired, like I'm done pretending to be happy when I'm not. I felt a surge of helpless frustration. So everything we've built means nothing to you now? You're ready to just walk out. No explanation. No remorse. She crossed her arms, her gaze hardening. You think this was easy for me? You think I wanted to feel like this? She was raising her voice now, almost defensive. I tried, all right? I tried to make it work with you. But somewhere along the line, I stopped feeling like myself here. And I know that sounds selfish to you, but that's the truth. The way she said it, like she'd been trapped, suffocating all these years, left me speechless. She hadn't been happy, not in the way I thought. I could feel my anger dissolving into a mixture of betrayal and sorrow. This wasn't just about her cheating. It was about her rewriting our entire history to justify what she'd done. So that's it, huh? I said, voice low, staring at her like I was finally seeing her for who she was. You're just going to walk out and blame it all on some vague unhappiness? Not even give me a chance to make things right? She hesitated, and for a second, I thought maybe there was some part of her that would regret this. But she just shook her head. I can't be the person you want me to be, not anymore. Maybe I've outgrown us. And maybe you'll understand that one day. I stared at her, feeling the finality of it sink in. She was done. She'd been done long before I even knew there was a problem. And the worst part was, she wasn't sorry at all. She was ready to move on. And here I was, left to pick up the pieces. A heavy silence fell between us, so dense I could barely breathe. I kept waiting for her to say something, anything, that might redeem this moment, some spark of regret that would make me believe she felt even a fraction of what I was going through. But there was nothing. She stood there, her expression stone cold, like she was already gone. So what now? I asked, finally breaking the silence, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. Are you just going to pack up and walk out tonight? Run off to Jason, and that's it? She shrugged, a small, careless lift of her shoulders, as if the details were trivial. Look, I don't know what you want me to say. Maybe it's best if I leave, just for a little while, so we can both think. Think? She'd spent who knows how long thinking this through, planning her exit, crafting lie after lie, and now she was suggesting we needed time to think. What about the house, our plans? We were supposed to be building something together, Emma. I thought we were a team. I said, my voice raw. I hated myself for sounding vulnerable, for practically pleading with someone who'd already decided I was disposable. But I needed her to know what she was walking away from. She looked at me with an unreadable expression, almost detached, as if she were evaluating a business transaction rather than ending our marriage. I don't know, okay? I'll stay with a friend or somewhere else. I just think it'll be easier if I'm not here. My jaw clenched, and I took a step closer, unable to mask the betrayal that twisted inside me. So that's it? No counseling, no trying to fix anything? Just toss out everything we built because you've outgrown us? She sighed, looking away, her face softening with an almost irritating pity. I don't think counseling can help us. Not when I felt like this for so long. It's not just about Jason. It's about me. I need something different. Those words cut deep. She needed something different. And apparently she was willing to destroy everything we had to find it. I realized, in that moment, that she'd already left me. Long before this conversation, she'd slipped away piece by piece, while I was still there, believing in us. Fine, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper, as a strange calm settled over me. Go. Find whatever it is you think you need. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, but it was gone before I could make sense of it. She nodded slowly, as if finalizing the decision in her mind. All right, I'll grab a few things and be out tonight. And just like that, she turned, heading upstairs to pack, leaving me standing there in the middle of a life she just shattered beyond repair. I stood there, listening to her footsteps on the stairs, the distant sounds of drawers opening and closing. It felt surreal, like I was floating outside myself, watching this scene unfold from a distance. The woman I'd planned a future with, the woman who I thought was my partner, was upstairs right now, throwing her life with me into a suitcase. A twisted curiosity gnawed at me, driving me to follow her up. I needed to see her in this moment, packing up everything we had without a second thought, leaving like it was just another night out with friends. When I reached the bedroom door, I paused, taking in the sight of her moving around the room like she was in some kind of trance. She tossed clothes into a bag without much care, her eyes avoiding mine as if I weren't even there. I couldn't help but notice she'd chosen the things I knew she'd bought recently. The nicer clothes, the newer shoes. Not a single thing that had any trace of us in it. Everything she was packing screamed new life, a fresh start somewhere else. Finally, I cleared my throat. So, this is really happening, I said, my voice thick with a mixture of anger and sadness. She froze for a second but didn't look up. I think it's for the best, she replied quietly, continuing to pack as if the conversation had already ended. For the best, I repeated, incredulous. Is that supposed to make this easier for me? Because right now, it just sounds like an excuse to avoid feeling anything real. She stopped, closing her eyes for a moment before turning to face me, and for the first time, I saw a hint of guilt in her expression. I don't expect you to understand. I know it sounds selfish, but this is something I have to do. Staying here, pretending we can just fix this, it would only make things worse. Worse, I said, my voice rising. Emma, you made it worse the minute you started sneaking around with Jason, lying to my face, hiding things in your bag. You're not just hurting me. You're walking out on every promise we made, every moment that mattered, and you're doing it like it's nothing. She closed her bag, exhaling slowly as if summoning the last of her resolve. It's not nothing. I just can't stay here anymore. I can't keep living a lie. The irony stung. She was the one living a lie, and now she was acting like I was the one who'd been holding her back. But I was done arguing, done hoping for some kind of remorse. It was clear that she'd already made peace with her choice, even if it left me shattered in the process. All right, I said finally, stepping back to let her pass. If this is what you want, go. But don't come back expecting everything to be waiting here for you. She paused in the doorway, her face a mixture of relief and sadness, but she didn't say a word. She just nodded and, without another glance, walked down the stairs, out the front door, and into the night. The silence that followed her departure was suffocating. I stood there in the empty doorway, staring at the spot where she'd just been, half expecting her to turn back, to say something that would make this whole thing make sense. But there was nothing. just the hollow echo of her footsteps fading away and the soft creak of the door closing behind her. I walked back into the living room, sinking onto the couch, my head in my hands. The reality of it all hit me in waves, each one stronger than the last. She was gone. Not just for the night, not just for some space, but gone. And she wasn't coming back. As I sat there, memories flooded and uninvited. The day we moved into this house, the late nights talking about everything and nothing, the moments that had once felt so solid, so unbreakable. All of it felt like a cruel joke now, a setup to a punchline that ended with me alone, in a room stripped of meaning. I glanced around and saw traces of her everywhere. The books she'd stacked on the shelf, the scarf she'd left draped over the armchair, even the mug on the table from that morning's coffee. Each item felt like a remnant of a life that no longer existed. It was like she'd left pieces of herself scattered around, little reminders of what used to be ours but was now just mine. Hours passed as I sat there, numb and paralyzed. I kept thinking of all the warning signs I'd ignored, all the little clues that I'd brushed off as stress, as routine. Had I missed this? Had I been too trusting, too complacent? Or had she really changed so completely, so suddenly? The questions clawed at me, but none of them brought any comfort. They only made the ache deepen. A part of me wanted to call her, to demand more answers, to get her to admit she'd made a mistake, that she would come back and fix everything. But I knew better. She'd made her choice, and if I called her now, I'd just be giving her the satisfaction of knowing she'd broken me. Instead, I picked up my phone and opened my messages. There was a text thread with her, our last exchange from earlier that day. It was a string of casual words, nothing out of the ordinary, just the usual small talk. The last text I'd sent was, "See you tonight. Love you." The irony of it twisted in my chest. I stared at those words, feeling the weight of everything unsaid. And I knew that the man who'd sent them that morning was gone, too. This betrayal had changed me, whether I wanted to admit it or not. For the first time in hours, I allowed myself to feel something other than numbness. It was anger. Not the sharp, blinding fury from before, but something deeper, colder. An anger that told me I would get through this. That one day, I'd be standing on the other side of this pain, and it would only be a memory. But for now, all I could do was sit in the silence, letting the reality of my life without her sink in. And as I stared at that final text, I knew that my only option was to find a way forward, without her. The next morning was brutal. I'd barely slept, my mind running in circles around everything that had happened, replaying every word of our confrontation, every cold look she'd thrown at me. The silence of the house was louder than ever, pressing down on me, reminding me of her absence, of the life that had just been ripped out from under me. I dragged myself out of bed, desperate to shake off the weight of her absence. But every corner I turned in the house held something of hers, a reminder, some echo of a life we'd shared. Her favorite mug sat on the kitchen counter, her sweater hung on the back of a chair. The photos on the wall, the two of us on our wedding day, laughing on some beach vacation, goofing off in the kitchen, felt like taunts now. They were snapshots of a life that no longer existed, images of a lie that had quietly dissolved while I was too trusting to see it. Unable to take it anymore, I grabbed a box from the closet and started going through the house, collecting her things with a numbness that felt like armor. Her scarf from the living room chair, the necklace she always left on the nightstand, the books she'd never bothered to finish. Each item I picked up reminded me of the life we were supposed to be building together, the future that was now just a ghost haunting these rooms. Then, tucked under a pile of old magazines, I found something that stopped me cold. A notebook. I'd seen her jot things down in it here and there, and I assumed it was filled with random notes, maybe grocery lists or to-do items. But as I flipped through the pages, I realized this wasn't a collection of random thoughts. It was a journal, a glimpse into her mind, with entries spanning the last several months. My hands shook as I read, each line a revelation, each entry peeling back another layer of the woman I thought I knew. She'd been documenting her feelings, writing about the emptiness she felt, about how she'd outgrown our life together, about the new possibilities she was considering. There were entries about Jason, about how he made her feel alive, how she felt like she was finally rediscovering who she was, as if I'd been holding her back from some imaginary self. The most recent entry, dated only a week ago, was a shock. In it, she wrote, "I know I'll break his heart and maybe that's selfish, but I have to follow what feels right for me. He'll understand someday, even if it hurts now." She'd been planning this for weeks, methodically detaching herself while leaving me in the dark. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. She wasn't just walking away. She had orchestrated this, all while pretending to be my wife, acting like everything was fine. I dropped the notebook, feeling a wave of disgust wash over me. All this time, she'd kept up the charade, lying to my face while she mentally checked out and planned her escape. And she hadn't even had the decency to tell me to my face that I sat there, staring at the notebook on the floor, its pages still open to that final entry. Her words, "I know I'll break his heart. Maybe that's selfish, he'll understand someday," rang in my ears. She'd planned this so carefully, with so much distance, like I was some stranger she could dismiss with a neatly written note. The worst part was realizing how long she'd been gone emotionally, long before that final confrontation. She'd been slowly detaching, dismantling our life piece by piece, while I'd been none the wiser, obliviously building the future I thought we both wanted. I reached down, picked up the notebook, and flipped further back, reading entries I'd missed before. The early ones were subtler. She wrote about feeling restless, and how she needed more space and freedom. First, she hadn't mentioned Jason by name. She'd written vaguely about meeting someone new, someone who saw her differently, someone who made her feel alive. I could almost see the shift in her words as she began to detach, her entries going from ambivalent musings to firm convictions. And then there was a line that stopped me cold. "I feel like I'm finally becoming who I was meant to be, and I can't be that person with him." That single sentence sliced through me, leaving a hollow ache in its wake. She'd decided, on her own, that I was the one holding her back. It wasn't enough to find herself. She had to rewrite our entire relationship as some kind of prison she needed to escape. Anger, sharper and colder than before, pulsed through me. I felt like I'd been reduced to a footnote in her life story, someone she could discard on her path to becoming this new version of herself. It was like I was reading a stranger's words. I wanted to hate her for it, to resent her with every ounce of my being. But beneath the anger, there was a raw, aching sadness I couldn't shake. The loss of the person I thought she was, the woman I thought I'd married. At that moment, I knew I couldn't keep her things around. They were nothing but painful reminders, fragments of a life that no longer existed. The scarf, the necklace, her favorite books. I shoved them all into the box along with the notebook. I didn't care if she came back for them. To me, these were pieces of someone I'd never known at all. Someone who'd written her exit from my life while I was still thinking we were building a future. As I closed the box and set it by the door, I felt the weight of finality settle over me. The woman I'd loved was gone. I was left with nothing but the truth, and that truth was something I had to carry forward, without her. The box by the door felt like a gravestone. Everything she'd left behind, packed away, ready for her to collect if she even bothered. I stared at it for a long time, feeling the emptiness settle in, solid and undeniable. The life we'd built was reduced to that small cardboard container, and any hope I had of salvaging something from this betrayal vanished. In a way, the notebook had given me something I needed: clarity. It was painful, brutal, but final. There was no ambiguity left, no more questions gnawing at me. She had made her choice, long before I even knew there was one to make. In the days that followed, I threw myself into anything that would keep me busy. I went back to work, took on extra projects, made plans with friends I hadn't seen in ages. I was trying to fill the spaces she'd left, to create a new version of my life that didn't have her in it. There were moments, especially late at night, when the loneliness hit hard. I'd lie awake, staring at the empty side of the bed, the silence a stark reminder of what had been lost. But even in those dark hours, I reminded myself that this pain, this heartbreak, would eventually pass. A week later, she texted me, just a simple, hollow message. "Can I come by and pick up my things?" No apology, no acknowledgement of the damage she'd done. Just business as usual, as if I were some landlord holding a forgotten package. I typed back a short, impersonal reply. "It's by the door. Let yourself in." I left the house that afternoon, unwilling to face her, not wanting her presence to linger in what I was now rebuilding. When I returned, the box was gone, and with it, every last trace of her. I thought I'd feel relieved, that this final removal would bring some closure, but it was quieter than that. The emptiness felt clean, like a wound that had finally been cleaned out, ready to heal. The weeks turned into months, and slowly, painfully, I began to move on. I forced myself to go out, to reconnect with friends, to fill my days with new routines. I started traveling, revisiting dreams and goals I'd put on hold for her. Each day, the ache lessened bit by bit, and I felt myself growing stronger, more certain of the path forward. If there's one thing I learned from this, it's that sometimes the person you think you know best can become a stranger overnight. Trust, once broken, isn't something you can just glue back together. I'm not sure if I'll ever fully trust someone again, but I know now that I'll be fine, stronger even. Looking back, I don't feel anger as much as I do a quiet resolve. I loved her, yes, but I've learned that sometimes, letting go is the most loving thing you can do for yourself. And as hard as it is to start over, I'm learning that there's a new beginning on the other side of betrayal. A version of life that's mine alone, free from lies, free from pretense. And that's a life worth living. And just like that, she was gone.